Welcome back, everyone. If you could join us back on the main floor, we're going to get started again. Thank you. Okay, so our next featured artist is Naila Keleta-Mae, whose artworks are entitled Abundance, Sequence, and Masking Tape, and whose short videos are Gizada, Digital Dust, Her Flowers, and Black Cake. A little bit about Naila. Dr. Naila Keleta-Mae is the principal investigator of the Black and Free Research Creation Project, a Dorothy Killam Fellow, a Canada Research Chair in Race, Gender, and Performance, a Royal Society of Canada College member, an associate professor in the Department of Communication Arts at the University of Waterloo, and a multidisciplinary artist. Her books are Performing Female Blackness, which is published by Wilfrid Laurier Press. It was published in 2023, and Beyonce and Beyond 2013 to 2016, published by Routledge in 2023, just last year. Her full-length music albums include Firewoman, 2020, Bloom, 2009, and Freedom South Africa, 2001. And her plays are No Knowledge College, 2005, and Stuck, 2001. She has commentated for the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, Business News Network, CTV, the National, Today's Parent, and the British Broadcast Corporation. Help me in welcoming Naila Keleta-Mae, who will be interviewed by Jaleesa Ricketts.
Okay, so before we have our little conversation, we're gonna screen two of Naila's films. The first one being a film called Gazada, and the second one is called Digital Dust.
An exquisite Jamaican pastry. The recipe, as told and shown to me by Miss England. 1 coconut, soak overnight till the skin soft, then peel and grate. 2 cups flour, baking flour if you have, if not, all-purpose fine. 1/4 teaspoon salt. Stick of butter, make it soften. I use half cup chocolate. 1 egg. 1 tablespoon of lemon or lime juice, whatever you have. 1 cup ice water. spread the coconut mix into it. Put it in the oven and add the burrata into a pan and put it in there too. Put it in the oven and add the burrata into a pan and put it in there too. It will keep the guisada moist. Bake till it cook. Bake till it cook. Bake, bake, bake till it cook. Bake till it cook. Oh, bake till it cook. Oh, bake till it cook. Lost in space. Part 1. I forgot. Forgot. Lost in space. Part 1. I forgot to download. I forgot to download. I forgot to download. I forgot to. This isn't done. This isn't done. This isn't done. Memory lost in space time. Love is gone. I remember just like now.
Thank you. I haven't seen them on a screen before. That's why I was like, just looking. Not that big. Sorry.
Thank you.
indulging.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Naila. So while we're getting the slides back on, I was wondering if you could share with us, where did the project using your grandmother's saying everything you need is right here develop from?
Yeah, those are these three pieces over here. I've never. The pieces started because I was just going about everyday life, and I was like looking at these little pieces of paper. I was like, oh, you could make something with that. Like I could make just random thoughts of like, oh, this is an interesting texture. This is an interesting looking thing. But I'm not a maker of things in that way, so I didn't really think anything of it. But those ideas started coming like earlier this year. And then I think often about my grandmother saying everything you need is right here. And that's like about resourcefulness. Like that's about just don't go out and buy. You've got to use what's in front of you and what you have, and trusting that what you have is enough to realize whatever it is that you're trying to realize, both in a material sense of actual things, but in terms of a sense of self, like inside of yourself, you have everything that you need as well. And so that's often playing in my mind when I'm trying to solve things, and I want to solve it by buying, or I want to solve it by, I need to change this. And I was like, no, what you have is right here. So I kept having this impetus to collect things, and then I thought, I'm going to make something. It was like, that was as much as it was. And then I thought, I'm just going to really work through this idea of everything you need is right here. So I got a cloth bag, opened the drawer of my nightstand, and just started taking things out. Like, what could I make if I took these random things? I had a candle that I had just finished burning. I was like, okay, what if you use this candle holder? And then I was talking to the research team about, I wanted to make something that was domestic and using found objects. I'm just tired of like buying things as a solution, right? So I wanted to really work with found things, and so I asked, so the research team for everybody, every artist that we've commissioned, 19 artists now at Black and Free. I know, I'm so proud. $3,000 commissions to 19 Black established and emerging artists over the last few years. And so I asked, and they always get research material. So depending on what you're doing, they'll research the topic and give you some source material. So I asked you for source material on domestic things and on like using found objects. And one of the references you gave me talked about a team that did this like forensic investigation of an existing artwork where they were able, without taking apart the artwork, to determine what the bonding agents were, like how they had been assembled. So then I was like, oh, I need a bonding agent. Like this is how all the pieces. So then I went into my children's art bin of all their old art things, and I just started pulling things from there and putting that into the same cloth bag as well. And then I laid all those things out on a table, and I was like, make something. Like, make something. So, and I was like, make something useful. And make something that you love. And I love flowers, so I started thinking about making flowers. So I'm using all of their things to make it, and I realized I don't have a canvas. I don't have anything to, like, I hadn't thought all through those steps. So I was like, well, you're not gonna go buy a canvas, you have to find a canvas here, because everything you need is right here in your life, in your home. So I shop at No Frills, and in No Frills, they'll give you these cardboard boxes, produce boxes, so that's what those are. It's a produce box, and then the first one that I made, I wanted to paint it, because I was like, I don't want it to look like a produce box, but it is a produce box, and I couldn't buy paint, because it has to be with what you need is right here. So when I found this little bit of paint that was left in a can from something that I had painted, my child's furniture thing that I was trying to give new life, so I painted it this blue, and then I used that, but then the paint was running out, right? So I'm like, just the whole process. So I made one, and then I realized I wasn't done, and I wanted to make more, and I found 2 more No Frills boxes that I liked, and I was like, I'm gonna make those, but I'm not adding new material. So then that was a whole, like the glue finished partway through number 2. So I had to start using masking tape. Masking tape is not a very aesthetically interesting thing, but I'm like, this is what I have. So now I'm painting on the masking tape or using markers on the masking tape to try to make it more interesting. And it was like a process of seeing resources. Like I had a piece of fabric. I used tons of it in the first piece. And then bit by bit, my fabric got smaller and smaller, and I still had more work to do. This beautiful paper that I liked, that was finishing, so that it just became more and more. And the markers started running out of ink, so I couldn't use the colors I wanted to use. And so it was this process of like every solution was literally in the next room or just right beside me. But it was that thing of saying, no, I'm not going to solve it by adding things. I'm going to solve this and make this with what I have. So it was a real meditation for me. That's why the first piece ended up being called Abundance, because I look at it now, I'm like, I use so many good things in that one piece. If I had known I was making 3, oh my gosh, I would have scaled it down so much, and there would have been a little paint on all of them. There would have been a little bit of this on all of them. But yeah, so I have my receipts that were in my nightstand from like Shoppers Drug Mart and No Frills that I cut up, and so that was that process. And then for the films, the videos, the shorts, I've been wanting to make videos for like 10, 15 years, and for a whole wide range of reasons, just never did. And so part of my Canada Research Chair is to make this series of videos, because I was like determined that I'm going to force myself like to do this thing that I've had in my mind. And I thought it was going to be realistic, and I was going to get actors and a set and the whole thing. And as I was working through it, I just kept thinking, I'm so tired of realism. I'm so tired of what is. Like, I'm just conceptually tired of doing that myself. A lot of my work is like grounded in realism, and so I just wanted to do something that was, yes, grounded in realism, but that was also surreal. And so I worked with Aljamain Gale, who's actually I met because he's one of the artists that we commissioned, and he describes himself as a transformer and a composer, and that he takes like, so I used real images, source images, for the first piece from Accompong, Jamaica. So that's like the images are real, but then he runs them through these patches that he creates that then distorts the images and like pulls them or stretches them or brings out the saturated colors. So we talked a lot about surreal and dreamlike, trying to ground the real in this other space. And that's how the short video series came to be and came to have that aesthetic.
Beautiful.
That's it. Thinking.
So I want to go back to the domestic creation projects that you did. I think that it's so interesting that you described it as autoethnographic, which is such an academic term.
Yeah.
But it basically, do you want to describe what that is?
Yeah, autoethnography is a type of research, qualitative and research that started probably like close to 30 years ago now, and it's about understanding a particular life or looking at a particular life to understand a larger way of life. And so I've done and in many ways it's very similar to autobiography, which is what writers often use. And so autoethnography was bringing that component into research. And I guess what's like interesting to me about autoethnography is that I think of Black artists for centuries have been drawing on their personal life to understand a way of life, not in an academic context that would be peer-reviewed and such, but it has long had that quality of like, if I look at James Baldwin, Frantz Fanon, if I think about my life, I'll have a better understanding to a way of life. So yes, autoethnography is about 30 or so years old, but that practice of trying to understand the world through your own life is much older than that, and definitely has a very long root or very deep roots in Black studies and Black academic practices. So I was thinking about autoethnography from a visual perspective or tactile.
Right. And I think what's so interesting about that is because, you know, the home is such a vulnerable place. Yes, and your work reminded me of the Kitchen Table series by Carrie Mae Weems, where she takes a bunch of photographs in her kitchen to kind of show the intimacy of that space. And I think it's interesting because the way that you're showing the intimacy of your space is through found materials in the home, which I think is super powerful. So I was wondering if you discovered anything about yourself while sourcing the materials throughout your house.
Well, first, I love like the Carrie Mae Weems, that kitchen table series. I've looked at many times and find so moving in its simplicity and its clarity. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to. It's called the Kitchen Table series. Yeah. So quite simple, but it was just showing intimate moments of Black life around a kitchen table in black and white. And at the time, it was quite a big deal, you know, to be showing those intimate aspects of life. And in terms of what I learned myself through the process was, I think differently about waste and about my own consumption. Like, so now, you know, if whatever I'm doing, I'm looking at containers. Like, I'm, you know, taking the strawberries out of the container. I'm like, this plastic container could be an interesting canvas of sorts. I could put things inside of it. And like, so it's changing how my mind is approaching seeing objects. And the invoices, like seeing that ongoing consumption as well as like from the mundane to, you know, to just going through that process. And then the other thing I learned about myself was it felt vulnerable in that I wasn't using expensive materials. I wasn't using what I think of as traditional materials. I was thinking a lot about Basquiat as well, just in the sense of like creating work that was outside of what was happening at the time and had like an abstract quality to it. I was definitely thinking about the childlike aspects of what I was doing. Like when I'm curling the paper, I'm like, I did this as a kid. You can't do this and be making serious art. Like this is something that you know, this is for 10 and under, Naila. So that's what I'm thinking as I'm doing it. But I'm like, but you're using kids' paper and you don't, like, what else are you gonna use? Like, you know, you can't go to the paper store and buy like beautiful craft paper because that's the antithesis of the project. So you are using your child's old paper that has odd patterns on it. Like that's what's happening. So I felt like a lot of insecurities, I would say, and vulnerabilities came up in the process that I wanted to push through just because as an artist, I've learned whenever I have those experiences, there's something important for me in the process and on the other side. And like similar with the videos, like just experiment through it. Like, will people understand it? Will they not understand it? You know, like I should go and record it in an expensive studio and like make sure the audio is pristine. I'm like, but I actually don't want the audio to be pristine. Like, so it was all of those conversations around, I think, legitimacy and what makes art and what makes art good versus what makes it kitsch and what makes it handcrafts or arts and crafts. And trying to leave all of those things aside and just make what was in my heart. That was the challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this is what you were talking about too, right, Andre?
I was just going to say your work really communicates with each other in a lot of ways. I think that you mentioned a lot of this just now, but your work seems to be making a lot of social commentary on sustainability and consumerism. So going forward, how do you think that how this will like impact your creation?
In so many ways, I think. Like as part of Black and Free, I had the opportunity for that research project to be in Italy this summer for the Venice Biennale, which happens every other year. And it's been happening since the late 1800s, and it's understood to be the most important international art fair in the world, and it's where artists, their careers can change radically from the process of being at the Biennale. And then there are a handful of countries that have pavilions on site where they take over, they might have just one artist take over an entire pavilion and install their work in there. So it was just this incredible experience of seeing a wide range of art. And one of the pieces that I saw there, this woman, and I don't know her name off the top of my head, but it's, she would grow bamboo on her property and then would dry the bamboo, cure the bamboo sticks, and then painted on each of these bamboo sticks. And the installation was maybe, I want to say like maybe 20 feet long by, I want to say maybe 15 feet across, like a rectangle, with like invisible thread that was suspending each of these bamboo sticks. So there might have been maybe 40 or 50 of them, like a city. She called it a city, and each one is hand-painted, and you know, any angle you walk around it, and you just see different scapes, like different ideas come up and evoke so much emotion. And so that's inspired me to want to see this evolution of everything you need is right here. Like, I want to just keep, until I'm done, and I no longer look at objects and have this impetus to do something with them, I'd love to see that. Like, I'd love to make something where I'm making this huge scale, this big space that has the cardboard, the no-frills carton boxes, and maybe some strawberry containers, whatever they are, because that impetus to keep making things has not, like just yesterday I was collecting something, I was about to throw something in the recycling, and I was like, oh, no, no, no. And I was like, Naila, you don't have time. You don't have time. It's like, you have to have time because this voice is loud. So the voice is loud, so I'm making time. So who knows? Maybe in some years I'll be inviting you to come see my 15 by 20 foot rectangular installation with a whole series of things based on what I have in my home and not buying anything else.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to it.
We're down for it.
So I wanted to talk about the films a little bit. So we just watched Gazada, and there's another one called Black Cake that explores archive through recipes. And I just want to say, like, the curation of this is really interesting because I think all of your work sort of speaks to each other in a lot of ways. Like Alyssa, who we're going to see in a bit, works with archive as well. But I wanted to sort of pick your brain as a Jamaican from the diaspora. You know, a lot of people say that it's a really good way to stay connected to home through food. So what role do you think that food plays in resistance?
Food and resistance, wow. I think of how many recipes have been lost and how many I didn't capture. My mom, who is here, is an amazing cook. Like, I've just grown up eating amazing food. That I have not been able to reproduce in my own home, just so we're clear. But my mom is an amazing cook, and it's there's so much love in the food. And I think that when you're eating food that is not generally available culturally, like when most people are eating pizza and pasta and, you know, shepherd's pie, and you're eating curry chicken and plantain and rice and peas and curry goat, it becomes a kind of resistance because you're locating yourself, no matter where you are geographically, you're connecting yourself to where you were. And the recipes for me, like two of my favorite, my grandmother was, my mom's mom was an amazing baker, not formally trained, but just like a tremendous baker. And she would make drops and gazadas, two of my favorite desserts, and I saw some drops back here, so I'm buying some later on. But so my grandmother passed away, and I just did a quick sketch of her recipe one time when she was baking, but I lost it. And so I was in Jamaica for another reason, and there was a woman named Miss Evelyn who was making gazadas, and I just was like, please show me how to make them. And so I wrote it down as she was saying it and tried to transcribe the recipe in patois. So that's where that came from. And then the images that go with that video are from Accompong, Jamaica, which is Maroon Town. Not Maroon Town, but it's way up in someone's nodding their heads, way, way, way up in the hills. The Maroons were enslaved, Africans who were brought to Jamaica who refused enslavement and fled to the mountains. And when we drove up to Accompong, and you're going up these narrow roads and you're seeing how high, you can understand why they would flee to the mountains. And so the Maroons fled to the mountains, and on January 6th of each year in Accompong, they have a celebration of their signing of a treaty with the British over 200 years ago where they insisted on their autonomy. And the Accompong town remains autonomous from the Jamaican government, and people continue to live there now. So you see images there from Accompong because I wanted to connect that Maroon life and resistance to the recipe. So that's what you see there. And then for Black Cake, that's a recipe that my father gave me in the late 90s because he was concerned that we were losing Jamaican culture and losing connection to those recipes and that resistance. So he typed out this pre-computer, typed out this Christmas cake recipe for me and gave it to me, and I always vowed that I'd make it, have never made it. But the images for black cake are from a place in Nova Scotia, from Birchtown, which is, we did some research on this too, Jaleesa, for Black and Free. So I visited Nova Scotia for Black and Free as well last year. And that's where black people have been in Nova Scotia since the 1700s. And they also have, and some Maroons actually were also in Jamaica. Jamaicans went to Nova Scotia in the 1700s as well. So there's like a whole history of connections between Jamaica and Nova Scotia, between Jamaica and Canada, that dates hundreds of years. But I bought a recipe book from Africville. Africville is a place in Nova Scotia where they resisted all kinds of things, but also worked to create an independent black space there. And they had a recipe, a cookbook of old recipes from the Africville community, and they have a dark black cake, or dark rum cake as one of the recipes, with ingredients that are very similar to the Jamaican Christmas cake. So I wanted to bring in those images from Birchtown, from Nova Scotia, while talking about this Jamaican cake, again, to connect the two places. Yeah.
Wonderful,
Thinking
yeah.
about resistance.
No, for sure. Also, we have black cake. Yeah,
Yes.
so if you haven't had it before, now's your
that's
chance.
it. That's
Yes.
the black cake, Andre. Oh,
No.
yes, and you'll taste the rum in it. You will taste, there's
Absolutely.
wine in there. You'll taste all the alcohol. Yes, you will.
For sure. Another film that you showed was Digital Dust. And I thought that one was particularly interesting. It's my favorite. Because it has this juxtaposition of you verbally sharing this sort of warmth, human emotional depth, versus the kind of cold, unforgiving, analytic, cybernetic like void,
Yes.
as opposed to depth. And this was because of your loss of some material that was
Yes.
pretty devastating.
Yes.
Did this experience, well, of course I'd like for you to share that experience for those that don't know, and did this loss of material change your relationship to technology at all?
Love-hate relationship with technology. That's what I have. Digital dust. The images that I lost were images I took in Jamaica earlier this year. My mom is finding out for the first time. That's why her face just fell. Yes, they were images that I had on WhatsApp but didn't download. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. And when I got to that, they were like, they're not here. So you can just see them, they're blurred. I imagine this has happened to other people before, where it's like blurry, so you're almost there, but you're not there. And it's lost somewhere between that phone and my phone, somewhere digitally, it's lost. And the digital dust is the terminology that's used to describe like these remnants, these digital remnants that we have in space. And so that's where that came from. And it was like, well, what happened before we had technology? Like, I was alive before we had this kind of technology. And what do I do about those memories? I remember them. Not necessarily accurately, but I conjure them in my mind's eye, and I remember them. So that's where that was coming from. And in terms of how I feel about technology now, I promise you I download, I save things in multiple places. That's changed. That is definite. That has changed, you know? But yeah, I just wanted to think through loss and think through memory, because we don't call on memory as much anymore now, I think, because of this expectation that we're always capturing, as though this capturing captures, you know? And so it was just reminding me to just actually be present in places and try to remember them, regardless of whether or not I have images to correspond or video that corresponds or a reel that corresponds, but just to actually be there enough to remember it, because that's what happened when I couldn't get to the images. I was trying to remember, okay, and then what did we do on that day? And I was actually trying to draw on my memory. So, and I think there's something beautiful, many people have written about memory, and I think that there's something beautiful about the inaccuracy of memory too.
For sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. So your fourth film was called Her Flowers, and it's visually accompanying the audio in a really great way because there's a lot of greenery, and it thematically works really well with the voiceover that discusses a sort of period of growth for you. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you approached sort of collaborating with Aljamain in making these abstract visuals.
Such a great experience working with Aljamain. I think Aljamain just strikes me as a deeply curious artist, and that's reflected in his work. Like deeply curious and deeply interested in, from what I can see, I don't want to speak to the breadth of his artistic practice, but like really interested in understanding how technology can be manipulated in the service of art, which is not something that I think of as much. Like I'm a writer primarily, so I think of technology as a place where I'm like holding words on the page, but not like a place where I'm creating words. But he's like looking at this of how, not just, okay, we're gonna edit a film or edit some images. He's wanting to pull apart and transform these images, and then he also created a soundscape to accompany the audio as well. So we talked a lot about like dream spaces and surreal spaces and how to mix the very real aspect of these are photographs. So the photographs for Her Flowers were taken in a place called Red Ground in Jamaica, where I have family history. And so, well, it's where my mom's people are from. There's a theme here, parents, family. That's deep in my work. So those were where those images came from. And that process of working with him was like just talking about which images go with what texts and why they go together for me. And like when I wanted like saturated images, saturated colors too. And so he really worked with transforming the color and the exposures of the images. He calls them patches that he would create. So he would create a patch just using one or two images and show me the patch. And then based on the patch, I would think about which text I wanted it to go to, or I would write text to the patch in some cases. And then when he got my text, he would go back, and my audio and my images, he said that he would go back in and then change some of the patch as well. So for example, for Gazada, you'll see some remnants, and also with Black Cake, you see images from Birchtown and Maroontown, and you can then Akompong, and there are places where you can actually make out the words. So originally in the patches, it was all blurred, but he was saying that as he was working with them in the words and thinking about the historical significance of the locations, he wanted there to be moments where you could see it. You couldn't make out every word, but that you could see, okay, Birchtown, okay, Maroon Burial Ground, like where you could make out these place markers. And so he did that with the first patch, and I was like, yes, let's make sure we do it with this one and not this one. So yeah, it was a great, I hope to work with him some more. It was just a really, it felt like an experimental, and I just want to experiment as an artist. That's where I am right now. I just want to try new things, make new things, work with people who work in different mediums, and create things. Like, I just want to create new realities, new spaces. Like, I would love, one of my dreams is to, in a physical space, is to create that box so that you could be in it. Like, that's where I am. Like, I just want to create worlds, and so I really loved creating worlds with Aljamain, and I want to continue to experiment and make things that have moments of realism, like the clarity of the word that's kind of anchoring. So here's a recipe, you can be anchored in that. Here's a poem, you can be anchored in that. But like, let's rethink what we see and how it sounds. Yeah?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So I have a final question for you.
Oh, I think, yes.
So I was wondering what Blackness and freedom means to you.
Yeah. So black and free for me is a lot of things. I remember as a child writing a poem called Freedom. So I've been thinking about freedom for a long time. My very first album, in 2020 was called Freedom, is called Freedom, and it's about freeing the mind. So I've been thinking about freedom for decades as a place of art making. And then in 2017, on a Twitter rant, I was like, I'm committing the rest of my life career to thinking specifically about Blackness and freedom. In part because I found that a lot of my work as a Black artist was often being framed in terms of anti-racism or racism work. And I was like, that's not, and I understand that and have done that, a lot of that kind of work, but I wanted for me to be thinking specifically about freedom. Like that's where I want my mind to be, and not to have an answer as to what it means, but to open up the conversation, because so much about Blackness is collapsed into these tiny ideas of like this stereotype or that stereotype. And so I wanted to think of freedom expansively, and I wanted to create a project where multiple perspectives on freedom could be shared, not because one is better than the other, but because there is a breadth of definitions, just as there is a breadth of Black people and political, social views. Like, we run the gamut. And so Blackness and freedom, for me, is something that I've been thinking about, again, for as like one of my early poems, so as a child. And then with this project, Black and Free has meant 19 commissions. I'm the 20th artist. I didn't get commissioned for it, but the 19 artists who've been commissioned. It means the art catalog that will be coming, featuring all of these artists' work in a couple of years. I'm partnered with Wilfrid Laurier University Press, so there'll be a coffee table book showing all of the artwork that's been commissioned. The team has been writing essays about the artist's work and putting them into conversation with each other. Black and Free is an edited anthology that will be coming out in a couple of years, featuring emerging and established Black studies scholars who are writing about Blackness and freedom, some about this project, but just about how it connects with the environment, how it connects with children, like all kinds of aspects of Blackness and freedom. Black and Free has meant the partnership that I've had with this project with Young People's Theater. Through that project, we have had 3 different playwrights propose ideas about what a play for children could be that was about Blackness and freedom. Done a pilot course, a 5-week pilot course last year, theater course for grade 7 and 8 students that was free for the participants, where they were thinking about theater, Black theater in Ontario as an expression of Blackness and freedom. We just did a 12-week course earlier this year. Black and Free has meant that I've partnered with The Edge, which is a grassroots community organization, and we helped, Shanique led a lot of that, did a lot of the groundwork for that, but where we had we had Black youth come to the University of Waterloo campus on 2 different days last summer to imagine themselves in post-secondary spaces, not because they need to go to UW, but because I just want them to imagine themselves at a post-secondary institution, that they can be Black and free in these spaces too. And they met with different writing centers and student support services, so that no matter where they go, hopefully they'll think to reach out to those people and make a home for themselves wherever they are. I mean, Black and Free has been the Ken Sealing art exhibition that we did, that started off as a 2-day exhibition last year, and that then developed into a 9-day, like got extended for an extra week because of the robust response. And it's been trying to have vendors who don't pay for their tables, we don't take a cut, just wanting to spread some economic moments too, so I encourage you to go and shop and support Black businesses. So Black and Free has been, and for me now, it's been also a place of like starting out a new artistic practice and having a place to think it through and a place to share it. So yeah, my hope is like if people are thinking about Blackness and freedom, and like artists are so powerful. And so much of our artistic practices have been, in a sense, co-opted in pursuit of the market, in pursuit of commercial wealth, in pursuit of fame, all things that are understandable and reasonable. But I think that what it means is that in many cases, that the substance of what we're making is not connected to necessarily what could drive communities and people forward and to help them to understand themselves in the world in a more nuanced way and a more grounded way. So my hope is that like Black and Free will encourage artists to think about that, to center that in their own work, and that it will have economic means too. Like, I'm really proud of the economic impact of Black and Free, of the artist educators who've been hired to teach those courses, some of whom, got hired to teach a class or a workshop and then now have a job at Young People's Theater. It's been like artists who are commissioned to make work, and the artists own their work entirely, so if they go on to sell their work, then they got paid to make it and they get paid to sell it. Like, so I'm hopeful for economic impacts, educational impacts, academic impacts, community impacts. Yeah, that's what Black and Free has meant to me, and as an artist, it means I get to make things. I just want to make things, and not really the freedom to make it however it comes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I think we have time for maybe two. Oh. Yeah. For maybe two questions, if anyone has some questions in the audience.
I just wanted to say again, thank you so much. Like, this is incredible. I recently had the pleasure of meeting your mom, and she let me know that you had conceptualized Black and Free since you were 9 years old. And to see how far it's gone and where it's going is so incredible. So thank you so much. When you were describing your methodology of creating this work, it's so important. Like, not only the sustainability aspect, but how you're pushing through those self-doubts. And you're just so confident in sharing your vulnerability with such resources, and that's such an important thing I think that we all need. I would love to see or ask you, how do you think you can share that? Because the work alone is stunning and powerful, but how it was created I feel like needs to be shared. So do you have any ideas on how you can share that?
I appreciate the question, Andre, and I would say beyond today, no. I haven't thought about it. Well, I mean, it will be also in the art catalog, but it's something that I know that I have to continue to explore. Like, that everything you need is right here. It's been such a helpful mantra for me and guiding light for me through my whole life that it actually only makes sense that now it's embedded in my artistic practice. It was never something that I thought about with art making, but every other aspect of my life, it comes up. I think of my grandmother. Everything you need is right here. So I hope to continue and plan to, because I'm still looking at containers. I'm still, picking up packaging in the house and receipts. So I know that it will continue. And hopefully as it continues, I'll keep making things and talking about it. But I also welcome any ideas you have about how to share it too, because I'm new to it. And not new to facing the vulnerability, because I've done that so much in poetry and so much in writing and like playwriting as well. But I have such deep respect for fine artists and for art makers that it's to figure out how to make work in that space, there's a level for sure of intimidation, right? So it's just felt really useful to feel small in something and to be like, okay, well, I'm not doing that thing. I'm not trained to do that thing, but this thing I feel really called to do, so I'm just gonna keep moving in this little space. So I feel like I'm just eking out my little space and working from there, and then we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, I'm way over there, one of the vendors.
Yes, with the drops.
Yeah. You really captivate me from a far distance over there. Watching the work on the screen and the eloquency of how you deliver your artwork. It's unimaginary for me. Now, I felt that with that kind of hard work that you bring to the level of it, which is Black and Free, it's time for you to get so much involved in the governments so that they are able to put money into art, because this is really different. It gravitates me, and it's like, wow, this is hard, but I didn't see it from that form. But the way you delivered it, it brings such joy. There's peace. I see stress is no longer a part of me, just watching your artwork on the film there. So congratulations.
Thank you. That means so much. I should say as well, Black and Free is funded through government research grants. So as an academic, as a professor at the University of Waterloo, I've applied for provincial and federal funding. So this project, the Black and Free aspects that have been commissioning artists and doing this kind of public-facing work is through a grant called the Ontario Research Excellence Research Fund Research Excellence Grant. So it is provincially funded, and then my other work and other aspects of Black and Free, so for example with the videos, that's funded through SSHRC, which is the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, so that's federal as well. So just to let you know that there is provincial, and your money, your tax money is going into doing this kind of research and creating publishing opportunities for research assistants. I'm also really proud of that with Black and Free. We've had about 24 research assistants on the project over the last 7 years, and over 90% have been people of color, and a vast over 80% have been female identified. So really working to support undergraduate and PhD research assistants so that they can get all the resume credits they need to progress and matriculate and hopefully, you know, become professors and be changing the face of what's happening in our post-secondary institutions as well. So that like training and development part of it is definitely there. So yeah, and like thank you so much for your words. That means more to me than I can say actually right now. I know I'll be thinking about it tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I also want to say like an additional thank you like on behalf of Shanique and I and what this project has done for us. You're incredible. It's been a game changer. And she really is just as wonderful as she is presenting herself. She really lives the politics that she preaches, and it's given, you know, us so many amazing opportunities. So thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
that.
Hardest working research team in the country. Yeah.
Did you want to shout out your social media and where they can find us?
Yes, you can find me at Naila Keleta-Mae on any platform. Naila Keleta-Mae, that's my name. Even on Facebook, you can find me there or at Naila Keleta-Mae. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I hope to find you there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
be back
you so
shortly.
much. Enjoy some food. Go
Yes.
to the vendor fair.
Great. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.